Hello, and welcome to the final lecture of week 5. We're transitioning now from ethics into epistemology. And so I wanted to give an introductory lecture before we really get into any of the sort of meat of epistemology, the main things that epistemology tends to study. So epistemology is the study of knowledge. Episteme means knowledge, and ology means study of. And so we can ask a question, and philosophers generally do. What is it that we know? Transitioning from ethics to epistemology, right? The questions that we've been thinking about up until now and discussing, talking about, thinking about are questions of the nature of right and wrong, what makes an action right or wrong, whether or not we should act in certain ways or live in certain ways, what kinds of obligations we have, etc. Epistemology doesn't ask questions about moral value, but asks questions about epistemic issues, namely how we know anything at all. That is how we can possibly come to know whether or not we know anything, what counts as like good kinds of evidence for believing things that we believe, and then what knowledge is itself as a kind of mental state that we are in when we believe things that are true. Now, so we can transition, in a sense, from ethics to epistemology in thinking about these questions, right? So, so far we've just sort of assumed that it's possible for us to know what's right and what's wrong, and then ask the question of like, okay, well, what makes an action right or wrong? Like, we know that murder is immoral, but what makes it immoral? Well, those are the kinds of questions that normative ethics actually tries to answer. They say things like, well, what makes an action immoral is that it doesn't maximize happiness, or what makes an action immoral is that it violates some duty that a person has, or some right that some other person has. But how do we know what's moral and what's immoral? How do we know what rights people have, what obligations people have to one another? How do we know what makes something maximize happiness? And I mean, to go from there, like, how is it that we even know what the best kind of life is? How do we know that happiness is the thing that we ought to be pursuing? How do we know that happiness is valuable? Well, those are basically the things that, bring us to what we might think of as the epistemology of ethics. And I just sort of wanted to bring us down this path and then move directly into epistemology, because it's an interesting question when we wonder how we know anything about ethics at all, right? I mean, I know that murder is wrong in, pretty much every scenario. If I kill someone in self-defense, it's probably not really murdering them, because I wasn't intending to kill them with malice. I was intending to kill them in order to stop them from attacking me, right? In order to murder someone, it seems like you must be trying to wrongfully harm them. But how do I know that murder is wrong? Like, how do I know that harming others for unnecessary reasons is wrong? What is it about me and those actions that allows me to have access to the wrongness of those actions, right? I mean, it's not like we see people get murdered on television and think, I see the wrongness in that action, in the way that we can see the redness of someone's shirt or of an apple on the table. These are issues in the epistemology of ethics, and they, broaden quite quickly into general issues in epistemology. So first, I want to bring up some basics. There's 3 important distinctions that will be really, I think, important in general for epistemology, metaphysics, and eventually talking about the philosophy of language, semantics, that everybody needs to know, and it's worth kind of getting clear on. So here are the 3 important distinctions. They're distinctions about statements. And so you can think about statements as like, there is a difference between a sentence and a statement. A sentence is like something is a, a sentence involves words, and words have shapes, right? A statement is beyond that. It's the thing that's expressed by a sentence, right? It's possible for two different sentences to express the same statement in a certain way, right? And so here we can go from there. Here are three distinctions between statements. True statements can be either necessarily true or contingently true. True statements can be known to be true a priori or a posteriori. And true statements can be true in an analytic way or in a synthetic way. And now I'm going to go explain each of these. So the necessary versus the contingent. Statements can be true in two different ways, or two different modes. There's two different modes of truth. Necessarily true statements are true no matter what. Basically, these are the kinds of statements that reflect facts that can't be changed. They're immutable facts. They're things that are necessary. They will never be different and couldn't be different. Now, this is, we need to be careful here about our choice of words versus the facts that we're trying to express with our words. Certainly, certain necessary truths could be expressed using different words, but that's a different story. Just because words can change doesn't mean that the facts that the words are used to express change. Examples here. 2 + 2 = 4. Every cause has an effect. Kyle, me, I am Professor Dickey. Kyle is identical with Professor Dickey. The identity statement there is the necessary truth. It's morally wrong to cause unnecessary harm to others, etc. Each of these, the statement expressed by each of these is arguably a necessarily true statement. It's something that couldn't change. Now, of course, it could have been that I didn't become a professor, but that doesn't mean that Kyle and Professor Dickey aren't the same person right now, right? It could be the case, of course, that the numeral 2 and the numeral 4 meant different numbers, but as the statement stands, the number 2 and the number 4 are such that if you add 2 twice, right? If you add 2 and 2 together, you get 4. Contingent truths, on the other hand, state contingent matters of fact. Contingent facts are basically facts about the world that could have been otherwise. A contingent fact is just something that didn't have to be the way that it is. It could have been differently. Examples here, that my hair is brown, that my dog's name is Joey, right? My hair I could have dyed it orange. I could have shaved my head. It could be non-existent. I could be bald. I could have named Joey any other name. The harvest moon this year is on October 1st. It's a full moon that's coming up. It could have been, on a different day this year, had the lunar cycle been slightly different. Donald Trump was elected president in 2016. That's a contingent truth. Whether or not Donald Trump will be elected again in 2020 is a contingent truth. It's something that's not set in stone, something that could have been different. The necessary and the contingent are a distinction between different kinds of statement again, where, so that some statements are necessary, other statements are contingent. I don't believe that there are any statements that fall out of this distinction. All right, statements that are a priori versus statements that are a posteriori. An a priori statement is a statement that is, if it's known, so if it's a true statement and it's known to be true, it's known to be true in that insofar as it expresses a fact, the way in which it's known, it expresses a fact that we know without having to rely on our senses. These are facts that are known prior to the use of the senses. A priori truths are known by a priori methods. And a priori methods are ways of knowing things that don't involve observation. They're things possibly like introspection and the use of reason. Examples of a priori truths are mathematics, 1 + 2 = 3 and beyond. Things like every event has a cause, right? Truths that are, you can just reflect on the meanings of what it is for some, like on the concepts of an event, and come to recognize that if an event occurs, there was something that caused the event to occur. Bachelors are unmarried men, right? Unmarried males. That's an a priori truth. It's something that you can know as long as you understand the notion of a bachelor. If you know what the concept of being a bachelor is, then you know that all bachelors are unmarried. And everything is identical with itself. I mean, there's a lot more than this, but this is something that we know to be true without having to go out into the world and experience it. We don't have to go observe things in order to know these. If you know what it is for something to be identical with something else, you know that everything is identical with itself. A posteriori knowledge is knowledge of truths that we come to find out about through observation in the world. These are basically the truths of science. I mean, they're all the regular, normal, everyday truths as well, but those also sort of count as the truths of science. A posteriori truths are things like water is H2O. Water is made up of the chemical compound two molecules of hydrogen and one molecule of oxygen. Cats are mammals, right? Like felines are a kind of mammal. That I ate breakfast today. That's something that, you could actually find out if you had observed me, or you could come and ask me and I could tell you I did. That Donald Trump's hair is orange. That's something that you just have to look and see. There's no way that you could find that out by reflecting on the nature of Donald Trump. All right, the third distinction is the distinction between analytic and synthetic statements. So finally, this is a distinction between the kinds of statements that doesn't apply to the kinds of facts that the statements are trying to express. Remember, when it comes to the necessary and contingent issues, those are the facts are necessary or contingent. Same with a priori and a posteriori. The facts themselves, the things beyond the statements are trying to express, those things are known either a priori or a posteriori, that is, through experience or not through experience. Whereas analytic and synthetic statements are statements that basically, if a statement is analytic if the statement functions in a certain way, or it's synthetic if the statement functions in a certain way. And here's namely the way it functions. An analytic statement is a statement that's true because of the words that are used in the statement and what the words mean. So take these sentences, for example. Bachelors are unmarried males. Uncles are male and have siblings with children. If you are a monkey, then you are a monkey. I am here now. Donald Trump's name is Donald Trump, etc. Each of these examples, if you look at it and ask yourself, is this true? The answer is obviously yes. And then if you ask, how do you know it's true? Well, the answer is because the words mean the way that they mean what they do, and you know what the words mean. So what makes each of these statements true is that the words are, have the definitions that they do. An uncle just is someone that's male, has a sibling, and that sibling has children, right? The sentence, if you are a monkey, then you are a monkey, is just a kind of tautology. It's true no matter what. I am here now is an interesting one. If you were to say it, it would have to be true. Anyone and anywhere can say it. You don't even have to know where you are in order to know that you are here now, right? You don't have to know where here is. Synthetic statements, on the other hand, express truths that are not true in virtue of the meanings of their words, and most normal sentences basically count as synthetic. Synthetic examples are things like all cats are mammals, right? That's true. Cats are mammals. That's probably a necessary truth. It's a necessary truth that science has determined. But it's not something that's analytic. It's not true in virtue of the meaning of the word cat that all cats are mammals. It's something that, is attributed to cats. Donald Trump is the president of the United States. That's a synthetic statement. It says that Donald Trump has the property of being president of the United States. It doesn't, it's not in virtue of the meaning of the name Donald Trump that he is president of the United States. Kyle likes to surf and play with his dog. Both, again, true, not in virtue of the meanings of the terms. Many SBC students live in Isla Vista. Again, the same. Science is probably our best arena for thinking about what we know as human beings in the sort of big sense, the sense of like all the stuff that we know, including the things that, you know, we as a human people know, not just individually. But there are a couple of different methods that science proceeds by. And those are interesting to sort of get out and talk about before we get any further into epistemology. The two methods are induction and abduction. Induction is basically a way of generalizing from some knowledge to a lot of knowledge, or from particular knowledge to general knowledge. You go from particular cases, and if they repeat over and over again, you feel justified in assuming some general claim. So, more often than not, when we observe particular facts, we come to know about things in general. We observe particular matters of fact over and over and over again, and we are able to generalize. So suppose I see a white swan, then I see another white swan, then I see 100 white swans. It seems like I can generalize from there that swans are white, and maybe I can make the hypothesis that all swans are white. If true, then it looks like I've formed an inductive generalization, and the inference that I've made from 100 swans are white to all swans are white, you know, maybe that seems like a good one in certain cases, right? Think about it this way. If I stub my toe, it will hurt, right? And then if I stub my toe again and it hurts again, and then I stub my toe again and it hurts again, and I stub my toe 100 times and each time it hurts, it seems like I can generalize to thinking, well, whenever I stub my toe, it hurts. And then I can make a hypothesis that is probably almost certainly true. Every time that I stub my toe, it will hurt. Induction is a method that we follow when we move from the things that we know through observation, the particular facts, to the general facts. We confirm the general facts through experiencing instances of the particular facts, especially when we observe them. Now, if I run into a black swan, which it turns out that there are some, then my inductive procedure has been fouled up. I can't really actually conclude anymore that all swans are white. But that's basically how science works, right? You construct a hypothesis on the basis of observed data, and you try to, the hypothesis is an attempt at generalizing from the data. But if you come across an example, an instance that fouls up your data and goes contrary to your general hypothesis, well, unless that instance is somehow a fluke, you have shown that your hypothesis is incorrect. Abduction is the other kind of general scientific method of knowledge. Abduction is basically what it is to appeal to the best explanation. So when you make an abductive inference, you are making an inference to say that a particular theory or claim makes or explains in the best way the phenomena that you're trying to explain or think about. So abductive inferences are the kinds of inferences that people make when the evidence that they have starts to cohere in a certain way. An example is that the Earth revolves around the sun, right? So the heliocentric view of, well, the universe first and then, the solar system is an example where Galileo believed that the sun was the center of the universe because there was so much evidence. Basically, how the stars move, the retrograde of the planets, how the planets move one direction sometimes and the other direction other times. Basically, just the general elegance of the models that we can see, I've posted a video that shows you what the geocentric view of the universe would actually have to look like in understanding the models of the orbits, if it were the case that the Earth was somehow the center of the universe. So abduction is a kind of inference that you take from a bunch of evidence to a conclusion that best explains all of that evidence. Abduction is also what we tend to use when we judge philosophical theories to be true, because more often than not, philosophical theories aren't kind of proven one way or another, especially the big general ones that we'll talk about. Usually we appeal to the best explanation given all of our knowledge, thinking that one is, and this is sort of the best way we know to settle what we think is likely the truth, even if we aren't able to know with certainty. There's some kinds of knowledge that we come by or have that doesn't seem like it comes by way of observation. In particular, one thing that we definitely do is introspect. And then also we sometimes use a priori reasoning. Now, here's a way of thinking about this. Can you know if your dog is in pain? I mean, of course, you can see or hear him yelp. You can see him attend to his injury. But can you really know if your dog is feeling pain? What about your friend's feeling of pain? Like, what if your friend yelps and, cradles themselves, but really they're just faking it. They're trying to get you. Some things that we know are, it seems, only really knowable through introspection. Examples here are things like whether you're in pain, how the pain feels, whether or not you're hot or cold, hungry, itchy, tired, angry, sad, happy. Of course, many of these states are always accompanied by certain external responses, like maybe your eye twitches, your brow raises, you smile or frown. But those external responses can often be faked or might accompany a bunch of different states. And so it's not always clear which state it accompanies. Introspection, however, is a way of knowing about what it's like to be you. It's a way of literally looking into yourself in order to determine what states you're in. And there isn't really any other way to find out these states using a reliable method. The most reliable method, as far as we know, to determine whether or not you're in pain, is to ask the person to dwell on whether or not they're in pain. Similarly, sometimes we seem to know things not by observation or introspection, but by reason alone. Math is obviously the best example here, I think. How is it that we know that 1 + 1 = 2? Or that 2 × 2 = 4? Or that 4 × 5 = 20? Is it by seeing something and then another thing and being like, oh, there's 2 things? I mean, maybe. But how do we know then that things aren't going to change? Like, how is it that we know that 1 + 1 = 2 is permanent and unchanging? Like, how? It just doesn't seem like the kind of thing that we know by induction. It's not that because I saw that 1 + 1 = 2 today and tomorrow and the next day that I can then generalize to, oh, 1 + 1 always equals 2. No, it seems like I know beyond that. I know that 1 + 1 will always equal 2. And I mean, it can't be that, I'm always adding up numbers and that's how I know that, those numbers added together will equal a third number. Like, what about really huge numbers that I've never added before, that I've never seen quantities of stuff like that before, right? Imagine, take a number that just doesn't seem to make sense to you, like 400 trillion, 30 billion, 22 million and $1. You've never seen that much money before. However, if we add that amount of money to $1, then we will have that much plus another dollar, right? It'll be that many and 2. Now, you've never seen that much money, so how do you know that adding another dollar to it is going to just push it up from 1 to 2 at the end? I mean, It can't be that you've experienced it before. So some things it seems like we know merely because we're able to reason about them. Examples other than math are things like, well, every event has a cause. How do you know that every event has a cause? Is it just from reflecting on the concept? Well, sort of. But you can think about what the concept is actually trying to express, right? The fact that's out there that the concept is trying to get at. And it seems like that concept, or the fact that the concept gets at, that thing itself is the truth that we're trying to understand when we say every event has a cause. It's not just that the words work in a certain way, and so that the phrase is true. It's that the fact that the words are trying to express is a truth that we couldn't possibly experience in life. But it's something that's true irregardless, and we know it for some reason, somehow. That is, it can't be, or at least it doesn't seem like that we know everything like this because of induction. It seems like we know things like that everything is self-identical, that happiness is morally good, that I'm here now, and that all bachelors are male, in ways that are, go beyond mere inductive reasoning, merely going from, oh, I've seen this case and this case and this case and this case, and then generalizing to the larger universal general truth. Now, there are two general sort of views classically understood in epistemology that take up this debate. Empiricism is the view that all knowledge comes by way of the senses, and that we don't know anything except what we observe and what we glean on the basis of observation. Rationalism, on the other hand, so empiricism, first of all, is a little bit strong because it says all knowledge comes by way of the senses. Rationalism, on the other hand, accepts that knowledge comes by way of the senses, but also says that some knowledge comes through other means. Some knowledge comes through means other than the senses. Generally, rationalists think that we know some things through reason, and that it would be possible, or that it's not impossible. No, that it would not be possible to know through observation alone. That is, some things like mathematics are not possible to know merely through observation, that we have to go beyond that in some way. Rationalists tend to appeal to mathematics as the obvious case of something that we know that doesn't actually rely on observation, where empiricists tend to push back. They tend to claim things like that math and other a priori knowledge isn't really knowledge at all. It's not like knowledge of the contingent scientific facts that we see every day in the surrounding, like, in textbooks and things. It's just, they think how we've tended to set things up, or part of our conceptual scheme. Basically, empiricists, especially contemporary ones, tend to think that phrases like, or sentences like 1 + 2 = 3, or every event has a cause, are true, but true because they're analytic. That is true in virtue of the way that we've set up our language, and not true because they reflect some deep facts about the world that we have some kind of magical rational access to. Now, the rationalist versus empiricist debate rages on today, and rationalists tend to have a problem in attempting to explain how it is that we have knowledge that doesn't come by way of the senses. But empiricists also have a problem in trying to explain the same thing, and also trying to explain how it is that the kinds of knowledge that we seem to have via that we get through rational reasoning, they have to explain how that knowledge doesn't really count in the same way as the everyday knowledge that we pick up from experiencing and observing the world. This is a very entrenched philosophical debate that is very difficult to break into, but I'm interested in what you guys think, and whether or not you think empiricism or rationalism are ultimately the more plausible view. This finally brings us to a problem, skepticism, and we'll be discussing that next week. And I just want to sort of set it up for us. So it seems like we know a lot. We know a lot of things, right? There's science, and then there's, everyday knowledge that, like, I know how to drive. Hopefully you do too. I know how to ride a bicycle. I know how to get up on a surfboard. Maybe some of you don't know how to do that. I know how to do some basic mathematics. I'm sure all of you know that. Maybe some of you are taking a math class right now. But are we really sure about the things that we know? I mean, do we really know all these things? And how do we know that we know all these things? Here's something that I think I know. I am currently in Goleta, California. If this is true, then there's a number of things that follow from it. Namely, things like what my attached left foot, the foot that I am actually is attached to my body, is also in Goleta, California, right? Given that I'm in Goleta, California, I am also currently inside of the United States. I'm also currently on the West Coast. But here's something that I don't think that I know. I don't think that I know that I'm not currently a brain in a vat that's been hooked up by a scientist to a computer that is causing all of my experiences right now, including my belief that I am in Goleta, California. I don't know that I'm not that brain in a vat. If those of you that have seen The Matrix, ask yourself this: do you know that you're not in the Matrix currently? Those of you that, follow Elon Musk or any of the other funny things that are on the internet these days, do we know that we're not living in a simulation? Doesn't seem that we do. It's something that I don't think that I know. If we're living in a simulation, everything would look exactly the same as it does right now. So it couldn't possibly be that I know that I'm not living in a simulation. Could it? Problem. If I don't know that I'm not a brain in a vat, then how do I know that I'm in Goleta, California? If I am a brain in a vat, I might be anywhere. I'm probably not in Goleta. And many of the things that I normally believe I know are probably wrong, right? I think this is my hand while I'm looking at my hand. Like, look at your hand right now and think, this is my hand. But also realize that if you're a brain in a vat that's being, fed experiences through a computer, then the hand that you're looking at isn't really a hand. It's not your hand for sure. It's a computer simulation of your hand. And it's a computer that's simulating your hand, causing you to believe that that's your hand. But it's not a hand. It's a computer simulation. A computer simulation of a hand isn't a hand. That's why you can't get in trouble for blowing off someone's hand when you're playing a computer game, because you're not really blowing off their hand, right? So if I don't know that I'm not in a computer simulation right now, do I really know that this is a hand? Here's an argument. If I don't know that I'm not a brain in a vat, then I don't know that this is a hand. I don't know that I'm not a brain in a vat. Therefore, I must not know that this is a hand. The argument generalizes. It gets way worse. If I don't know that I'm not a brain in a vat, then I don't know that P, where P can be all sorts of different things. I don't know that I'm not a brain in a vat, so I don't know that P. I might not know that I'm in Goleta. I might not know that I'm looking at my computer right now. I might not know that I'm making this lecture. All of these things could fill in for P. And it seems like because I don't know that I'm not a brain in a vat, that I don't know any of these things that I normally think that I should know. This seems crazy. And this is the beginning of skepticism. We're going to talk more about this next week. And so I hope that you enjoyed this sort of little introduction to epistemology. If you're watching this at the end of this week, be sure to work on your papers. What I want to sort of like get out of this here at the beginning is, what do you think you know beyond a shadow of a doubt, if anything? Are there other ways to know, do you think? And is it really the case that because I don't know that I'm not a brain in a vat, that I don't know that I'm not in Goleta or that I have hands?